Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video I want to talk about crafting materials, how we might have to source and process them and then finally use them for crafting. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the Armory. When talking about crafting, I think we first need to think about where and how we're going to get the necessary materials. Fortunately, Star Citizen offers many ways to do this and there are more to come. Let's start with the simplest, but in my opinion the one that will be the most important in the future. Harvesting and by extension hand mining. The reason for that is that these two options offer up many opportunities for creating very rare materials that need to be found and carefully harvested, which would give a very good reward for the risk posed by being in a cave or anywhere in the wild on foot. Now, of course, there will be plenty of common materials to be found, but hunting specifically for the rare ones should be very profitable. Plus, I imagine that a lot of players will like this exploration and prospecting gameplay. In terms of the economy, rare harvestable materials will likely be in high demand, since most players will try to use the highest quality blueprints whenever possible. So harvesting or creating them should be very profitable. Next, there's of course mining. I consider mining to be the primary resource extraction loop, not only because it creates most materials that are currently known to us in Star Citizen, but also because it's capable of generating them in very large quantities. Now, some of you will argue that mining tends to mostly create common materials unless you're very picky. But these materials will be very important too for more than one reason, but we will get to that later. We could also include fuel extraction in this category. Quantanium is a mineral that can be mined and processed. However, hydrogen fuel is much more interesting. We know it will be gathered from gas clouds or similar environments, and likely there will be ground deposits too. But many people forget that there will be different kinds of hydrogen fuel based on what the fuel was made from and how. And based on that, it might have different properties and performance. If I recall correctly, this information was briefly outlined in the Origin 100i Q&A. Next up, farming. Now, this profession doesn't exist yet, but I think it will be one of the first things to come when base building starts coming online. It actually creates an opportunity for an interesting mechanic, where you have to deliver the fresh produce to the point of sale or processing before it spoils. There will also likely be the possibility of growing rare plants that require very specific conditions or equipment. We will have to see what the final design looks like, but it's one of the professions I'm looking forward to the most. Before I move on to material processing, I would like to mention that there likely will be some vendors that sell materials that would be otherwise impossible to obtain. These vendors will probably require some reputation to get access to, which incentivizes players to engage with the missions and the communities they visit. This might also apply to having reputations with certain factions. For example, having a good standing with a mining company might grant you access to rare ores or powerful catalysts. Looting should also be mentioned here. I imagine some specific areas might have some very rare alien materials. For example, abandoned Banu settlements or crashed Vanduul ships. This might also incentivize players to venture into systems that are currently controlled by alien races to obtain these materials legally or by using force. Now we move on to the interesting part of crafting preparations. Just because materials start as common materials doesn't mean that they have to remain that way. I believe that most materials will require some kind of processing before they can be used as such. For example, let's say that you have mined an iron-rich asteroid. You now have bags of rock with iron ore and other minerals mixed in. This is not useful for much besides as backfill for construction. However, you can take this mix to the refinery and extract the iron and other materials. By doing so, you have created an actual common material and some others. There is also the option of ship refining, and we know that this will require catalysts to process ore into usable materials. And this is actually a common practice in real life too. Also, maybe you will be able to utilize the small amounts of other materials you refine as catalysts for future refining. But let's focus on the iron for a moment. You have created some amount of iron bars or iron filings, and this is what I would call a common or tier 1 material. It can be obtained in large quantities for little expense of money and time, but on its own it might not be terribly useful except for very basic needs. Here's where processing comes in. I think CAG will give us ways to process low tier materials to higher tiers. The reason for this is that common materials are very abundant and many of them likely can be processed further into alloys and such, or it might be possible to use them as catalysts for other processing. CIG could add this option to existing refineries and allow players to do this in outpost refineries as well. However, this brings the question of balance. If I can manufacture high-tier materials, why would I try to go look for them? Well, first of all, I think it's safe to assume that not all rare or high-tier materials will be possible to manufacture. For example, the alien materials and lootable relics I mentioned earlier will be one of these. Processing and manufacturing will probably only extend to metals, chemicals, and other man-made materials. However, this works both ways. Materials that can be manufactured in large quantities might not be possible to find or harvest in large quantities. But there will probably also be some overlap of rare materials that can be both found and manufactured. For example, rare alloys or circuits. Here CIG will have to figure out some kind of a balance for both options. Maybe some strong type of alloy is easy to find in wrecks of old ships, but it's prohibitively expensive to manufacture. On the other hand, military-grade circuits might be difficult to find but easy to manufacture with the right materials and blueprint. I am really looking forward to the crafting gameplay and the material and resource mechanics that come with it. It will allow players to replace equipment much more easily in case it's not available for purchase at their current location. I am curious to see how CIG will make crafting accessible to everyone. Will every larger ship have a small fabricator, or will there be a designated area in every landing zone? And with that being said, that's all for tonight. What do you think? Will material gathering be a major gameplay loop? How accessible is crafting going to be? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.